Welcome to Things My Mother Forgot to Mention.
The podcast where we say everything our mothers didn't.
I'm Jan, a trauma therapist and author turned rogue storyteller, here to talk openly about the body, aging, and all the, wait, what? Moments of womanhood.
And I'm Patty, an online business and tech nerd whose purpose is to elevate the voices of women in our world and who doesn't believe in taboo topics. Things My Mother Forgot to Mention is the podcast for every woman who's ever said, wait, why didn't anyone mention this to me?
Join Jan and Patty, two outspoken, curious, outrageous women, as they dive headfirst into a messy, magical, and often WTF realities of aging, health, and quite simply being a woman.
From rogue chin hairs and vaginal thinning
to mental health, perimenopause, and scalp cancer. Yes, really.
Nothing is off limits. It's funny, it's raw, it's real talk your mother definitely skipped.
Let's get into it. So, relationships, Patty.
Yeah, relationships.
Well, I'll tell you, I'd love to hear your story. I mean, my mom, she never really talked about having a relationship. She always talked about if you're going to fall in love with someone, you just know. I remember her saying that to me. And I was always like, I'm going to know what? Well, you'll just feel it. And I mean, that's kind of her advice. And I thought that was horrible. And her other advice, this is my story. You want to listen to this?
Yeah, I'm here for it.
Is my mom, she told me that she had sex before marriage. And unfortunately, her first son, my oldest brother, died at birth. And she said God was punishing her for having sex before marriage.
Oh, wow.
And so that was her way of helping me with birth control. I'm not exactly sure, but those are the things that she has done for me. I mean, telling me about relationships. You're just going to feel it and make sure you wait till you're married. Now I don't think anybody does that.
Yeah,
these
no. Well,
days.
no, I disagree. There are people that do. There are some people who are, very strictly Christian,
Yep,
Catholic, and they do.
true.
They are.
They do.
But
You're right.
the majority, I would say, especially in like Western culture, definitely do not, for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, she instilled the fear of God in me, and it worked. And I totally regret that because my first relationship, my first marriage, this is my second marriage I'm in. The first marriage was over in like 2 or 3 years. So
Did you wait until marriage?
I did. Can you
Oh.
believe that? I was 21.
Oh, wow. You got married young. That's young.
Mhm.
It
That's why I
was still
didn't stay
younger than
married very
me.
long. I was like, what? I mean, when I got married, I didn't know a thing about relationship, about sex, about nothing. It was, what was I doing? I have no idea.
Right.
Anyway,
Well, you were doing what we're told we're supposed to do, though, right? I mean, that's one of the things is that when we grow up hearing about how, especially as women, right, that we're supposed to find somebody to take care of us, and especially in older times is what I was going to say, but it's not what I mean, but but kind of, right? Like, so we go back into the 50s, the 60s, the 70s,
right,
even into the 80s, like that's what we're taught, right? Is that the woman stays home and you need to get taken care of and
right,
you need to find somebody. So really, at that point, a lot of the goal is to find somebody who's going to provide for you so that you can start a family and get your white picket fence and all of that stuff. And that's very different now as far as
hmm
all of that goes. Like I'm not married by choice and
hmm
childless by choice. And those are just things for me that never felt like an urgent
right,
situation for me. Like it wasn't a goal for me to be in a relationship. But my mom never really talked about, so like my situation's very different in that my father was a pathological liar and my father was very messed up, right? And so my mom really was kind of wrapped up in that. And so and when they finally it's a whole thing, so I'm not going to get all into it all. But when they got divorced, she was so in that that there wasn't ever really conversations about relationships. And she was really sheltered and she never got taught about
Yep.
relationships.
Yep.
And he was her first, and she went from living with her parents, and she was very sheltered, right into living with him. And so she never lived on her own or anything like that. And then they got married and they had my brothers and I. And so there was never, really any of that. And I don't remember her really talking about sex or anything like that, honestly. So for me, by the time and I had some childhood trauma that kept me at a point where I was like, I didn't like touch easily and stuff like that. So I was
Hmm.
kind of like, nah, like all my guards were up. So it wasn't easy for me to date anyway. But also, I was overweight and I wasn't cool. So dating wasn't much of an option
Wasn't a big
for
deal,
me.
right?
Yeah, it wasn't
Hmm.
because I was like, "Meh, whatever. Like, it's not, I wasn't somebody that I wasn't naturally attractive, right? So people weren't pining after me in high school
Hmm.
and I wasn't there a lot. So relationships for me just weren't a thing. And so when I finally was in one for the first time, I met a really great person and everything, but he was also an alcoholic. And
Oh
so I
dear.
didn't know, I just didn't understand a lot about what was respectful, what I should want,
Yep.
and he was very nice and he wasn't a mean alcoholic, he was a sleepy alcoholic and you know, but I didn't understand the importance of getting what I wanted and understanding that it was okay
Right.
to want
Well,
something
we
different.
call that neglect.
Right.
In psychotherapy terms, is that, I mean, as I listen to you talk about our first model or template of relationship comes from watching our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the good news and that's the really bad news.
Yeah.
And so when your parents, like my parents, were really struggling, I used to be in between the two of them a lot. You know, my dad would talk to me about how miserable he was. Then my mom would talk to me how miserable she was. And I'm thinking, wow, this is who wants to be like that? And
Right.
so when I listen to you and I think about my parents' relationship, my father was a drinker, alcoholic, and my mom was severely depressed, which is, and most of their life it was like a teeter-totter. And so I just wanted to get out of the house, which was stupid. I got out of the house, and that's what I did. I got married really young, and then I had to figure out how to be in relationship. And this whole idea, what you were just talking about, is how do we know what we're looking for?
Yeah.
You know, when there's screaming and yelling in a family, or a father that's doing that, or a mother, my mom would go raging and sometimes throwing things. So I'm thinking now, is that good communication? You don't know. You
Right.
never get a healthy, functional template. You get your
Yeah.
parents' template.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why there's issues.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even for that, right? Because they always say like you date your parents or whatever, like like you said that there's that model. And so like and I was with this person for a very long time. And so, but like in retrospect, when I look at things, I'm like, oh, I mean, what does an addict do? They lie. And so I
Hmm.
was with somebody who lied about everything. My father lied about everything,
Right. That's
but
right. That's
yeah, but when I was going into it, I'm like, as a teenager, I'm like, nobody will lie to me. I hate being lied to, and I need honesty. And that's exactly the first relationship I'm in. I'm like, oh, but that's okay.
right.
But that's okay. And but you have a good heart. And, there's all these things. And, he's a great person in all these ways. So I don't, by no means like
Mhm.
he's a great human. But in a relationship, it was very unhealthy in that
Mhm.
capacity. But I didn't know any better. And I didn't understand how to do that and that it was.
Well, then how do you know what to do that's functional?
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
the other thing is my mom was very in general like the guilt trips. And that's like
oh,
her
sure.
and for
Mhm.
everything. And so that was how I learned to communicate my needs was to try to it's manipulative, right? And I realized
Right.
afterwards it was codependent and it was manipulation on my
Mhm.
end, which is very also normal in an alcohol
Mhm.
relationship. And so I would, like sigh or make faces. And well, shouldn't he know by me sighing and making a face that
Mhm.
I'm having an
Mhm.
emotion and that he should tend to immediately? Right? Because,
Oops.
yeah, because I didn't know
Right.
better and I didn't know how to express it and say, oh, I'm not feeling tended to. I feel like I would like a hug right now. Or I feel
Mhm.
like whatever, I didn't know how to do that. So it was emotional manipulation, even though it wasn't malicious. I just
Mhm.
didn't know anything. And so that we're just not taught how to advocate for ourselves and our needs and our wants in a way that are healthy.
Right. Well, this goes into the whole, my whole category of everything that I've been teaching. And so again, I was thinking my dad, when he used to tell me about relationships, he would tell me what you were talking about. He told me that I should learn how to type so that when I, am unemployed or I'm looking for a husband, that I should learn the skill of typing and being like an administrator.
Right.
And so, I'm a little bit older than you are. And so this goes way back because that's what women did. And then they would drop out of their job and then they would have kids and they'd raise their kids. But like my mother was really pretty miserable as a mother.
Yeah.
She was not enjoying it. And my dad was gone a lot and he was a drinker. And so she was alone a lot. But what she taught me about relationship was never anything she said to me. It was what I watched, and
Yeah.
I watched it over and over again. And I don't even know when I started, when I got married, if I thought, okay, how do I get functional in a relationship? I had no idea. I had no, first of all, I had no sense of self either.
Right.
I didn't really know myself at 21.
Hmm.
And then talk about what I needed or wanted. I didn't really know that either.
Right.
So, I'm just, Pia Melody used to always say, we marry what is familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like that happened with you and your dad.
Hmm.
And with me, I went through quite a few different men. When I finally got divorced after about 3 years, I probably, and I'm not proud of this, but I lived with four different men for 2 years, each,
Mm.
probably throughout my whole 30s, until I finally thought, you know what? I really don't know what relationships are. I don't know
Yeah.
what health is. I mean, I had gone through so many relationships thinking, okay, this is the one, whatever that means.
Right.
And
Right.
then 2 years would go by, and then I'd be like, I am out of here.
Yeah.
So I'd go out and I'd find somebody else and I'd recreate another pattern. And I
Mm.
think that's where most people get really humbled because at some point you go, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to be relational. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it, right? Is when you're in these relationships and you don't even realize that you're in dysfunction because that's all you know, that's all you've seen,
Yes.
like you said. And that's why I'm sort of in this space of like, I felt like over the last couple of years, I finally have found this like peace in myself where I'm not looking, I don't, right now, like, I can't even imagine being with another human because I'm really just like, I want to be really clean and clear with myself and when I do interact with somebody in that capacity, I want it to be in a very clean and healthy way and nothing's perfect and it's never going to be perfect, but at least to go in with an understanding of not being codependent, how to have a clean conversation and express what my needs are, but also hear them. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things I learned because I did Al-Anon after we stopped
Oh,
seeing each other, because I
really? That's
still
good.
realized I was like,
Mhm.
dealing with all this emotional stuff. And the biggest thing that I learned in Al-Anon was that you can't control another person. And
Right.
one of the things that we do in relationships because we're taught to expect big romantic gestures and they're gonna tell, like you said, that you're gonna know that it's love and it's
Oh
true
my
love and it's the
gosh.
one forever.
Right.
And you're not, we don't talk about the fact that people grow and they change and that it's actually super normal
Hmm.
for people to like to stay together for a very long period of time is a lot of work and like a lot of intention and a lot of you had to have grown together in a way
Hmm.
but not everybody does. And I think
Right.
that we try to hold on to these relationships because we're like, well, we're supposed to be together forever, but are you? And not everybody is. Some people
Supposed to be.
do,
Mhm.
supposed to be. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, that if you look at the world and how you see movies, they're
Hmm.
all about those falling in love things
Yeah.
and the fantasy that goes with it and thinking that, you're in love with this fantasy until the reality shows up and then you're like, holy cow, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And but every show you see, when it's a big movie, it's all about the romance. And I mean, I used to think, when my mom would talk to me about relationship, that that's what I needed to have all the time.
Right.
You know what? Nobody can have that all the time.
Mm,
And
yeah.
we're human. That's the problem, is there's no way I can be having fantasy, having great sex every night and being lovable and talking and feeling seen and all that stuff. That just doesn't exist unless maybe you're, I don't know, some other planet, but not here.
I don't even love myself every day, like to a point,
Good.
let alone another person. I mean, I think somebody told actually my ex when we were together at one part early in our relationship, he was saying something about totally unrelated. I think actually it was before we were together, and he said sometimes because he had been in another long relationship, and he was like, sometimes I don't even we you don't always like each other. Like there are days and there are, weeks sometimes where you're just like, ugh, you again, like you love each other and it's deep, but it ebbs and flows like everything
It
in our
does.
moods and stuff. And like they
And
don't talk about
then
that.
it gets down to the idea of commitment. And this is
Yeah.
what I think is also a commitment and accountability
Yeah.
is trying, some days I don't feel, I've been married 35 years, 36 at the end of this year. I'm like, how did that ever happen? And
Mhm.
I'm telling you, it comes from, I mean, maybe these are some great factors to talk about, but commitment and wanting to make it work.
Mhm.
And when we were struggling, we did something about it. We didn't just say, oh, it's going to get better. I mean,
Right.
if I could say that to anyone, in fact, at my son's wedding, he got married about 2 years ago. I talked to all, I got to speak. Mom got to speak to
Mhm.
the Friday night dinner. And I said to him, I said, remember, relationships are challenging. They're not that easy. To be committed to spending time together, and especially when you have kids, to make sure you have a weekend together or you have a time for a date, because kids eviscerate marriage. They just take it over, and you have to fight for the relationship. And I said, so that's the number one thing. I said the second thing is to make sure that know that it's a process. Sometimes it's ebbs and flows, but it's the commitment that keeps you there. And the third thing I said is if you're in trouble and you feel like you're struggling, get help.
Yeah.
And so many people don't do that. Or they just stay in the relationship and they're miserable. And
Yeah.
that's not good for kids either. So,
Right.
this whole idea of relationships, I think we have such a warped kind of view of relationships in the United States. Well, I can't say for the rest of the world, but in the United States, let me say,
Yeah.
it's that it's going to be this wonderful thing and that we know how to do it, and we don't.
Yeah, we don't. Like I said, we don't even, and that's why I think it's crazy to me, like, especially as like I get that long ago getting married really young and people used to get married in their teens and stuff like that when life expectancy was shorter, right? But it's not the same anymore. And like to imagine myself in my early 20s getting married and having kids when I don't even know me yet and like I don't know how to take care of myself and I'm going to
Mhm.
take care of something else and I think that that's one of the biggest challenges is that like we said like how do you even show up for somebody else when you're not don't know how to show up
Showing up for yourself.
for yourself. And so
Mhm.
and I think that that is one of the things that I've learned the most in that relationship and even and mostly afterwards in the retrospect of it all was like and really being able to dissect it and because I've been in therapy on and off since I was like 10. So I'm very good at like stopping and dissecting and
Mhm.
analyzing
Mhm.
everything. And so like when I really have looked at it, the biggest thing is that so much of the attention that I had and that I think so many people have in relationships is that it's about the other person and the other person is supposed to fill these needs that is going to make it magical, that is going to make it work and all of that. And I think that to really have something work, you have to start by like, okay, what am I bringing to the table here? And what is it that I'm looking for? And can I give that to myself and to my partner? Why is my partner expected to do all of these things
Yep.
and to make me feel a certain way?
Mhm.
Because that's where there's a lot of that codependency. That's where we just are told to expect that it's going to magically happen and magically work.
Mhm.
But we have to work on ourselves. And I think independent therapy is important and couples therapy, if that's
Yep.
necessary, is
Yep.
important. But it's like, it's a choice that you make. It's not just something that you're just like, cool, it's going to work and it's going to be
Because
awesome.
it's
And
going to
it's like,
feel good, man, and everything's going to be great. It isn't. It
yeah,
isn't great. It doesn't always feel
it's
good.
hard, man.
And
It's
I,
hard.
my mom, I was under the impression when I was growing up that that's how it was supposed to be. And
Yeah.
boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I think about it now and like I'll go on dating apps briefly and then I'm like, I make
Yeah,
it
forget
like
that.
a couple days and I'm like, I just can't, I cannot right now imagine that. And like, I'm so happy living on my own and doing my own thing and like not thinking about other people. Like, I'm just like, I got my cats, I got my friends and my family. Like, I feel good about that. But at some point, if I want that, at least then I'll go into
Yeah.
it in a
I
very
mean,
aware and
people.
intentional
Mhm.
space that I think it'll make it quite a difference for me.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, we're meant to be attached. We're
yeah,
meant to be
we're herd
connected.
animals.
I mean, and so, I see today a lot of people are deciding to have dogs or cats instead of having relationship. There's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, the nature of us being human is that we want to be connected and
Hmm.
we don't really know how to. And I was just thinking of, of course, what I teach therapists. And what you've already outlined this, Patty. You just said, first of all, you need to have your sense of that you're worth it, your self-esteem,
Yeah.
boundaries. My mom never told me, she forgot to say anything about this, is that there's such a thing as that if someone's swearing at you or calling you names or shaming you, that that's not a good relationship to be in.
Right.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that. And
Yeah.
that has to do with boundaries, healthy boundaries. And
Mhm.
then my sense of self, I was 21. I didn't know anything about myself. Really, I was too young still, because I was just still trying to grow up in my family. And then as far as needs and wants, that all has to do with whether your family gave them to you or not.
Yeah.
And that's the neglect part. And then I think the last part you were talking about is interdependence. How do you commit to somebody and talk to them about what you need and what you want, and they do the same thing to you, and you don't try to control them? I
Yeah.
mean, most everybody is like, shut up, sit down, and do as I say so I feel comfortable. Well, it
Right.
doesn't work that way. It's like, what do I need to do on my side for me to be in this interdependent with this in this relationship? And one of the biggest things I learned is accountability. Like I never, all those men that I lived with, I would say maybe maybe one was accountable, meaning they said what they meant to say and they would do what they said.
Yeah.
And and I never even knew accountability was important. And since I did have two sons, accountability is everything in a relationship if you're raising kids, because you
Mhm.
need someone to show up for you and to be there and to be raising the kids together. That's the hardest part, I think,
Yeah.
in relationships.
Yeah, I think the other side of accountability is also being able to say, "Oh, I messed up," or "I'm
Yeah.
wrong,"
Oh, for
and
sure.
and being able to say that because we get so caught up in wanting to feel right and not and I think not feel like we want somebody to see the best of us, right? When we're
Mhm.
especially in the beginning of a relationship and
Dating.
everything,
Yep.
and like yeah, and like you want to be on the pedestal or whatever, and so. I think that idea of like if somebody sees you mess up or sees you, so it's hard to step in and say, "Oh, whoops, like yeah, you're right. I didn't hear you the way that or I said something to you that
Hmm.
wasn't very nice or I wasn't thinking about you at all and I was thinking totally about myself and that was really selfish." And
Hmm.
like it's so hard for a lot of us to do that, but that like, oh my gosh, leaps and bounds in a relationship if you're with somebody to be able to just acknowledge and that's accountability too that I think is super
Exactly.
important.
Well, that's like a 12-step program because what they talk about is making amends.
Yeah.
And because of our humanity and that we all make mistakes and we're hard to be in relationship with, is owning when that's accountability, owning when I screw it up and I offend you or hurt you, and I have to just get really accountable for it. And that is, like I said, if I could say any message to the world, if you're going to have kids, make sure the partner is that if you can't have your partner show up and both of you be accountable, because kids need security and safety and
Yeah.
stability, and they need to feel seen and they need to feel soothed. And if parents are checked out and they're fighting with each other, it sounds like your parents were doing that, my parents were doing that. Guess what happened to us? Besides looking at them as the template, we got lost in that family system, you
Yeah.
know? That's trauma.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And my parents weren't even fighting. Like we didn't even know until the end. Like
really
they didn't
interesting.
fight openly and because she was very submissive. And so
Oh, your
just sort
mom
of,
was?
yeah. So it
Mm,
was very just go with it because what do I do if we're not to get like,
mhm,
if I have to provide. So it didn't matter when the lying would happen. It didn't matter
mhm,
when other things would happen. Like
mhm,
it was just sort of like, okay,
mhm.
you know. And so that's, and which is also that
Yep.
for me that I learned of not, right, where I was with somebody who would trample over my boundaries and I'd say, well, I don't want you to drink and I don't want you to, but you did. Oh, okay, but you did.
It's
Okay.
okay. I'll let you off the
Okay.
hook.
It's
Right.
fine. You're good. You mean well. Like
Mhm,
that was how I learned to kind of be because that was my example in that way. So
mhm,
I think that, and the other thing I was going to say, unrelated to that, but kind of back what we were saying is that um, relationships get to look like you want them to look with you and your partner. And that's the other thing too, is I think that there's a lot of these, again, going back to like the fairy tale look of relationships, but not all relationships look that way, and that's okay too. And like, there's just all different. And what I mean by that is like, for example, if I'm with somebody again, I like having my own room and that was like, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like
mhm.
you get to share space together when you want to, but man, I think it's really important to have your own space and
Yep.
with your own stuff. And like there's something in
Exactly.
that that helps you with your own individuality in a relationship that keeps
Exactly.
you from relying fully. And so there's things like that. And that works for some people and not for others. And like I just think it's really important to say, like, cool, let's figure out what works for us in our relationship
Mhm,
together and not worry
mhm,
about, we don't want a picket fence and we don't want kids, or we do want kids and we want
mhm,
10 kids, or, whatever it is. And I think that's
mhm.
important too.
Yeah. No, that whole idea of having your own space. I mean, being in a relationship doesn't mean you're merged and you
Yeah.
become one. I mean, even though they say, we're one,
Yeah.
that's crazy. No, you're still individuals choosing to be in relationship and committed to each other, but that self-care and that time for yourself, to be alone, to do what you need to is essential for kind of being authentic in your own relationship. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I think this is very helpful. I hope this is helpful
I
for,
hope this is helpful for everyone, and we'll be speaking to another expert besides us, uh, of Lisa Merlo Booth, which I'm looking forward to talking to her about what her mother forgot to mention and for her idea of relationships and success today. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll include some resources in the website in case that is helpful for anybody. But just trust your instincts more than anything else, because if you really sit down and listen to yourself, you know what feels good and what's right in a relationship. You just have to
mhm.
not be afraid to follow that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is for all the years that I've worked with some women about love addiction, and love addiction is where they don't have a sense of self and it comes from their partner thinking that they still have value.
Yeah.
And when women are in relationships like that, they're afraid to leave them if they're being abused
Yeah.
because they can't live without their partner still loving them. And when their partner gets angry with them, it's like a hose get crimped, at the hospital when you're having a morphine drip, the
Yeah.
hose gets crimped and they go into withdrawal. And that's all the more reason why women really need to have a sense of self and their own self-esteem and boundaries and grow themselves up. And but love addiction is really toxic for women because, and men, I'm not saying just women have it, but that makes the relationship right there very dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jen. This was super great.
thanks, Patty. I enjoyed it. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you like what you've heard, please share it with friends, subscribe, and leave a review.
And remember, information shared on this podcast is not medical advice. If you have a concern about your physical or mental health, please seek support from a professional.
If you have a story you'd like to share about things your mother forgot to mention, you can apply to be a guest.
We'd also love to hear a quick 90-second thing you've learned in your life.
You can find links to both of those over at our website at
thingsmymotherforgottomention.com or in the show notes.
Thank you.